Well, this is looking really good. For a minute, it's kind of like, okay. All right, it's 6:02. So, hello folks, welcome to the first ever San Luis Obispo chapter general meeting via Zoom. I'm Melissa Mooney. I'm the current president of the San Luis Obispo chapter. And I want to thank you for being here, and I want to welcome you all. For those who are not members of CNPS, just a quick introduction. We are a statewide organization whose mission is to increase understanding and appreciation of California's native plants and to help to conserve them. This particular program tonight is being put on by the San Luis Obispo chapter of the statewide CNPS, and that's one of 35 chapters statewide. Okay, Dana, we can switch to our next slide.
It's not letting me now. Of course, now this is happening.
We hope everything goes smoothly tonight.
What? Okay, what happened? There we go.
All right, excellent.
Being finicky.
Okay, so just a few quick words before turning the lead over to our Vice President of Programs, Kristen Nelson. I'm going to remind you of a few of our activities. Obviously tonight we have a botanical and historical tour of Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Parks, and that is our chapter program tonight. Dana York is our speaker. On Wednesday, August 12th, the Mount Lassen chapter is going to be giving a talk, and it's a webinar also, a Zoom program, on the California Vegetation Treatment Program. I just thought I'd include this for those of you who are interested. You can go to the Mount Lassen chapter website and get more information about that program. We have a board meeting coming up September 2nd. The SLO chapter board meeting is going to be a Zoom board meeting at 6 p.m. We have an online plant sale coming up. Our pickup is scheduled for September 26th on Saturday. That's something that Judy has been working very hard on, along with John Doyle and Bill Waycott and David Krause. They've all been doing a lot of work on the online plant sale, and thanks to all of you guys for doing that.
Melissa?
Yes.
Just want to make a correction. I think the pickup is 9 to 11, not 9 to noon. So if I sent you the incorrect information, I apologize. But anybody who buys plants should rely on the information they get in the email.
Okay, 9 to noon. Thanks.
9 to 11.
Yeah. Sorry, 9 to 11. Thank you. Our October meeting right now is still scheduled for October 1st. We're going to have a member slideshow, but it's still a question as to whether it's going to be done via Zoom or whether it will be done in person. And same thing with the seed exchange, although we can't do that on Zoom. And then November, still TBD in our annual plant sale. We're going to decide on at the September board meeting. You can stay in touch with the chapter by going to our website, CNPS-SLO.org. You can see that at the bottom of the screen. Okay, so now moving on to tonight's program. We can switch to the next screen. Obviously, hopefully most of you are familiar with the Zoom program. You'll all be muted so that we don't have interfering noise and things like that. If you have questions of the speaker, once Dana gets started, just enter your questions in the chat window. Kristen and I and Judy will be monitoring that. And it's suggested that you use the speaker view. And for those of you like me who are challenged, if you in your upper corner, it's going to say gallery view. It won't say speaker view when you're in speaker view. It will say gallery view. So if you have it on gallery up on top, that's what's probably the best thing to use. We're recording this program to the web, and so people will be able to watch it later. All right. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Kristen Nelson, and she's going to say a few words about our tonight's speaker. And cross your fingers, everything's going to go just fine.
Yeah, thank you, Melissa. I am very excited about our presentation tonight. As Melissa said, this is the San Luis Obispo chapter's first go at having a general meeting via Zoom. And I just want to thank everyone who registered and joined us tonight. We will be continuing to work on our programs, and so I'm excited for tonight. I think we're in for a real treat. And so without further ado, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce Dana York as our presenter tonight. I'm going to give a little background here. Dana graduated from Humboldt State University and also CSU Fresno with a graduate degree focused on studying none other than the plants of the Southern Sierra Nevada. In his career, he has worked as a botanist in Death Valley National Park and also for the U.S. Forest Service in Southwestern Oregon. And during his career of working as a botanist in California and Oregon, Dana has discovered and named numerous new species. I'm actually not sure what that number is. Maybe Dana can share that with us, but numerous new species, and has also had a few species named after him, which of course he didn't do because you don't name species after yourself. Currently, Dana is living in Arcata and working for Caltrans in Eureka. And he just lives down the street from what is his favorite school. That's Humboldt State right up there. I have also had the opportunity to meet Dana one time at a conference, and I just want to say that not only is he a great botanist, he's also a wonderful person to talk to. And if all of that wasn't enough, he has published a beautifully illustrated book on the flora of Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Parks. And if you don't own a copy yet, you will want to by the end of tonight's talk. So without giving too much away, I just wanted to put a plug in. I own a copy and it is so beautiful. His book includes detailed descriptions of the various habitats found in Southern Sierra, a list of botanical points of interest. It has botanical keys, beautiful line drawings, species descriptions with range information, and so much more. Briefly, before I turn it over to Dana, for anybody who just jumped on and missed Melissa's comment, I just wanted to repeat really quickly, if you have questions, please go ahead and enter those in the chat window. You can bring up the chat window by clicking on the button at the bottom of your screen, and we will monitor those and make sure to try to capture as many questions as we can, mostly during the end, I think is our plan to do Q&A at the end. So I will leave it at that, and I'm going to turn it over to Dana.
All right, well, thank you. With that introduction, I'm not sure I need to say much more. And that was really nice. I mean, I'm going to have to go get some Kleenex. I might have to come back here. I mean, that was really nice of you, Christy. Wow. Well, hello, everybody out there in virtual land. You can see right now, I may have to actually go get a jacket, if not, Kleenex, because it's going to get cold up here at Muir Pass. It's quite high. I believe it's about 12,000 feet or so. It's actually right on the border between the Kings River and the San Joaquin. And you got Goddard up here, Ionian Basin, actually a really cool place. I had earlier, when we were setting this up at 5:30, I had Yosemite up there, and I thought, uh-oh, can't have Yosemite. I didn't do a book for Yosemite, even though my book does actually cover a lot of the plants in Yosemite, but that's another story. So thanks for joining us. I'm glad I'm kicking off the inaugural Zoom meeting for the chapter. for San Luis Obispo chapter, and I really appreciate that Kristen reached out and asked me to do this. Actually, I think it was pre-COVID, so I was going to do this in person. So this is a little different than I've ever done one of these presentations. I have been a member of California Native Plant Society since the 80s, so a long time. And it kind of started when I was a kid at Tilden Park, running through the botanical area there. And I know Michael, who's on tonight, Michael Euler, will appreciate that. He works there at the Botanical Garden. And it's such a wonderful place. When I was a kid, I loved it. I loved running through it with my brother. And I went there later and I saw that there was this organization called the California Plant Society. I said, hey, this is right up my alley. I'm a botanist. I love plants. And these are people that think the same way that I do and that love our native flora. So I've been a member ever since and haven't regretted a day of it. I've led lots of trips for Native Plant Society. I've been involved in, actions, legislative aspects too, writing letters, letter campaigns. I've been quite involved. And in fact, just yesterday, our president, Carol Ralph, up here in the North Coast chapter, I was just by her house. She told me where to find a couple orchids. And I was just looking at those, and they're just right by where she lives over in the dunes, which is really cool, the dune forest up here on the North Coast. I'll talk a little bit more about those orchids. I think I actually have a picture later, just from yesterday. So this is really relevant. I've got newer stuff, but I also have pictures from back in 1979. And that's the first one. There I am as a young lass. I'm actually not in Sequoia Kings Canyon here. I'm closer to Sonora Pass. But my love for that area kind of started in 1979 with hiking the Pacific Crest Trail for 2 months in the John Muir. It was the entire John Muir and a portion of the Pacific Crest Trail. It was 800 miles, so more or less, a little less than a third. But I really fell in love with the High Sierra, and that's something that stayed with me as I ended up working in that area and living in the Sierra foothills. I ended up finding some cool things, especially I was working as a botanist or a biologist for the California Department of Transportation. And I would find things like this Congdon's Lewisia, in the Kings Canyon area. And I just thought, wow, that's a really, really cool plant, and then here's a little closer of the flowers and the sepals with the teeth. And I started to really fall in love with the flora of the area. And the geology too. There's this area called Boyden Cave on your way to the park. You actually go through Kings Canyon, then out into the forest, and then it's the Sequoia, and then the Sierra National Forest is up on the other side of the river. And then you get to the park again, but before you get to the park, it's an area called Boyden Cave, and it's a huge piece of limestone there. And I was very interested in what rare plants might be on it. So it's pretty rugged though. So it definitely took some work to get around. And in fact, some of that you can't even, hike on. This is more of that area. This is where the South Fork and the Middle Fork, the confluence of the two forks. So basically it's the end of what I call Monarch Divide, and the Kings Canyon on the left on that middle fork of the Kings River. Kings Canyon, the national park just about comes down to that confluence. But on the right side, which is the South Fork, it's actually a ways up, several miles up until you get to the park. But that whole area is really interesting. And you can see it's very steep, and it wasn't glaciated. And that's part of the reason why it's such an interesting area and why it's got such a diverse, a good diversity, a high diversity of plants and rare plants too. Here's just some more of that limestone. So I ended up exploring that area quite a bit, and I'll get to some of the plants that I found up on there in a little bit. Oh, and one thing I wanted to say too about, this is going to take about an hour, more or less, to get through my presentations, and then there's a couple more slides to talk about for San Luis Obispo chapter at the end. And also any questions you can ask during the presentation. There's a little place to put on the chat, and I'll answer questions at the end, unless it's some really burning question, and Kristen will jump in there and ask me the question. But mostly I'll be answering questions at the end. So if anybody wants to ask me anything about the flora of Sequoia and Kings Canyon or the area in general, because I covered more the whole area and not just the parks. One of the cool plants that's in that area, and if anybody's seen this plant, is the Chaparral Yucca. And also, as far as names of plants, I'm just going to say the common name, the scientific name is written down on all my slides, but I'm just going to stick with the common name for tonight, because we have lots of different people that are part of this listening to the presentation tonight and watching it, and I don't want to get all bogged down in a lot of Latin, so I will just give you common names, but they're both on my slides. But Chaparral Yucca, I mean, these things, when they're in flower, they're just like big advertisements on the landscape. And so I love these in Kings Canyon. When you're going through, when they're in flower, you can just see them all over the place. When they're in flower, they're just outstanding, but they're not nice to walk next to. I've had a few stab me in the leg, and then the tip breaks off sometimes and it stays in your skin. So yeah, be careful walking next to these things. It's not much fun. And one of the plants that really got me interested in the area was finding Tehipite Valley jewel flower. And as you can see on the slide, there's a good reason why I was very interested in this plant, because it's spectacular. I mean, the photo doesn't even do it justice. It's like this bright red, purple. I mean, it's crazy beautiful plant. And there could be thousands of them on the limestone. In a good year, there can be so many of them. It's pretty crazy. It's a wonderful plant. It was only written up and discovered in the 60s in Tehipite Valley. And it was discovered on granite substrate, but that's not what it likes. It's very scattered on the granite in Tehipite Valley. There's not ever that much of it, but up above on the limestone, that's where it wants to be, and that's where thousands of them are. John Howell, that discovered it, never knew that that's not really the core of the population. He just saw what he saw and said, hey, this is new. Didn't understand that they were coming from the limestone down to the granitic sands in Tehipite Valley. It's just kind of spillover. Unfortunately, Indian warrior, a lot of people know this plant. That's not a great shot of it, but it's really weird that it's growing on the limestone there at Boyden Cave. It's just kind of an oddball. Pedicularis, it's not, that one might have been a little past its prime. They can be very bright red, so that's not the prettiest picture of one, but it is odd that it's just in these open areas on the limestone there by Boyden. And then another thing that's just not very common in Kings Canyon, and it's not on the limestone, but it's on the other kind of rock, the metamorphic rock, is this Abrams onion. Very beautiful and spectacular. And a couple of years ago, Boyden Cave, about 3 years ago, they had a fire that burned one of their bridges. And so they burned their bridge, so as the saying goes, and they couldn't get to their cave from their concession stand. So they closed it for the next season until they repaired the bridge. Well, while it was closed on the trail, this thing went crazy, because this is all along the trail to Boyden Cave before you get to the limestone part. And then it's not in the limestone, it's only in the metamorphic rock. And there was, 2 years ago, the year that they were closed, there were so many of these in bloom. It just kind of tells you when people walk on something that you never even know how many of like a rare plant are even there when people keep it down, suppressed. And that goes for grazing too. I've seen that happen, but that's another story. Okay, a cool rare plant. And anyway, if it says RPR, CNPS, RPR, that's rare plant rank. And 4.3 in California, and CR means California rare. This is Tompkins sedge, and there's a lot of it in that area. It's a it's kind of a rare sedge, but in that area, it's pretty locally common. But one of the things that makes this a little different and easier to identify than other sedges is it pretty much has just a one spike. And with that spike, it has the female part is below the male part, and it's just one little female perigenia and just one little spike above it. Anyway, it makes it pretty easy to identify this sedge. And another rare plant in that area is this Hall's daisy, which this thing, there's not a lot of it there, but where it is, it's very showy and spectacular. It's a rare plant rank 1B, which is it's more rare than the 4. The 4s are things that are just kind of watched and are kind of maybe rare in some places, but that they're more kind of a watch list in some ways, like a 3, but a 1 is definitely a rare plant. And so this is very rare in Kings Canyon. It occurs more down south, farther south in the Sierra Nevada. I think this might be as far north actually as it occurs is the Boyden Cave area of Kings. And then it's mostly down like Kauai, down that way. And this is a common plant in the desert. This is marble rock mat. And we have a different subspecies in the desert. When I worked at Death Valley National Park, we had just subspecies Cespitosum. And it wasn't considered rare, but this one is a rare plant for the Sierra. This subspecies is a little different, but it's hard to find these things actually in flower. They're just spikes of white flowers and they grow just like carpet pressed up against the rock. It does grow on granite, but it doesn't prefer that. It really prefers to be on limestone, marble, carbonate rock. And this is the quintessential tree, plant for the parks. I mean, this is really what started everything in the parks. And this is also in Kings Canyon too. So you don't only have sequoias, giant sequoias in Sequoia National Park. Actually, Kings Canyon and just outside of Kings Canyon, I don't know if a lot of people know that there's the national monument, Sequoia National Monument, which is a lot of, I think it's all actually Sequoia National Forest. And there's several groves on the National Monument, and then Kings Canyon has groves, and then of course Sequoia has more of the famous groves and the bigger trees. But this is what really started the whole thing about the parks in that area. So thank goodness for these wonderful trees. And now with the kind of the work I did in the 90s, I spent pretty much 5 years collecting and documenting and databasing all the known collections from the area, which, they started in the late 1800s, the collections in the area for Kings Canyon. I was mostly looking at Kings Canyon to start with, and not just the park, but the Kings River Basin, I should say. Everything in the Kings River Basin down to about 300 feet in elevation, so right down to the edge of the Central Valley or the San Joaquin Valley. So I went quite a ways down the Kings. So databasing all this, so I had thousands and thousands of entries. I had 2,000 of my own collections and thousands of previous collections done, like I said, for over 100 years, or just about 100 years of collections at the time. I databased all these, and this is some of my collection information. It's pretty small, so if it's hard to read on your computers, it's not really meant to be read. It's just to give you an idea of what a database kind of looks like. And then 1999, does that have the date on there? Yeah, 1999, December 1999, I published my thesis of the Kings River Basin. And it's basically a comparison with different areas of the state, comparing it with the Kings River area and the affinities. And just some of the conclusions are that the area, kind of to the north, Kings Canyon has a lot of the similar plants than Yosemite. And then to the south, Sequoia is more of a southern Sierra with more stuff from the southern Sierra. Diversity and numbers, I'll talk about that when I get to the numbers table. I'll talk about the numbers between the parks and outside the park. Because I like I said, the parks, well, this was just Kings Canyon for my thesis, but the parks are just a part of what I studied. I studied, like Dinky Lakes Wilderness was all within my study area, Jenny Lakes Wilderness. I had wilderness areas all in there. Now, just to give you a map, hopefully you can, I don't know if you guys see my mouse hovering over stuff, but this shows you kind of my study area. It's not perfect to show you the study area because I didn't do any of the eastern Sierra. So where you see Highway 395 on the right part of this map, well, there's this green.
We can see your mouse, Dana.
Okay, well, there's this green which I didn't cover because you get Mojave type of stuff in here, and it just gets crazy if you try to include that eastern Sierra. So, and the parks don't go over into the eastern Sierra. So Sequoia National Park down the south and Kings don't include any of that eastern. Here's Mount Whitney down here. All right. But so my flora does include the parks and includes a ton of the Sierra National Forest and a bunch of the Sequoia National Forest. Like down here on this bottom left, a bunch of this is included too in the flora. And the flora does have a map of what is included. So it's an area of I think it ends up being over 1 million acres total when you add all of these together. But I have some numbers about how big the parks are here in a second. All right, just a little background on the parks. When I got that little screen, it blocks it. So I better make that small first. Okay. So just real quick, a little background on the parks. I said it would be a little history on the parks. Sequoia was the first park in California to be established, and first national park, and it was the second national park in the whole country to be established. So it's been over 100 years, and it was established, of course, for the giant sequoias. That was the main reason. And General Grant Grove National Park was also established. The first national park was Yellowstone. Just put that out there. And so Sequoia came in a second. Okay, so that's all you had was Sequoia, which also had the General Grant Grove area, but they created Kings Canyon National Park, which took over Grant Grove because it's was more in the north anyway in 1940. So there are two national parks here. They were created at different times, but they're managed together, but they're actually two national parks. That's why it's always, plural, Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Parks. There are two parks here. And they've been managing them jointly since the 40s, like the slide says. And Mineral King was added in 1978. And of course, Mineral King is very famous as a test case for NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act. And, the ski resort that Disney wanted to build there and wasn't able to, going through NEPA and all the impacts. It just was going to be too impacted. So really nice area. Mineral King is kind of a high elevation area with some neat geology, very cool plants. In fact, I used a flora that was just for Mineral King that I used. I don't know if it was never published, but a kind of a checklist that was very important and very key when I did my flora, that I got that from a friend that had a copy of it. There's been other minor additions since the 80s to 2009. And just give you I was telling you earlier, I was going to give you some numbers about how big. So Sequoia is 404,000 acres, Kings Canyon's 461,000. So they're kind of similar in size. And then together they're 800, and then adding another 400 or whatever so of the adjacent Sierra, which I included in the flora, you got over 1 million acres. Oh, sorry, 97% is designated wilderness, which is good news. Roadless, designated wilderness, no wheeled vehicles. So that is good. It's good for the plants, because wherever you have roads, you know, being that I work for a roads department now, you have weeds that get in. So even on trails, you know, cheatgrass is making its way in places, but in the parks, especially Sequoia. So these numbers are real small, but hopefully people can see it on their computer at home. This is what the flora broke down to in numbers, and I'm not going to go over each one of these numbers, but the whole book includes 1,800 taxa, but of those, 230 are not native. So really for native plants, there's 1,587 that the book includes. Now, of that 1,587, you put the two parks together and you have 1,521, I'm sorry, you have 1,337 native plants. So of the 1,587 native plants, you have 1,300 and a few more that are native to both parks. But you look at the parks themselves, it's a pretty different number. There's 887 native plants in Kings Canyon, as opposed to 1,200 in Sequoia. So Sequoia just has so many more native plants. It's got what, 300? Well, a little less than 300 more plants. And the reason for that is, I mentioned kind of a long time ago in the talk already, is they have lower elevations. You have foothill woodland and you have chaparral. And really when you break down and I did this in the flora, I put what type of habitat every species was in. And the habitat that gets the highest number, you know, you can almost do a bell curve on this thing. The highest number of species occur in the chaparral, which is interesting. And this is foothill chaparral, not montane chaparral. And the foothill chaparral is very limited in Kings Canyon. There's almost none. So Kings Canyon loses a whole lot of species that Sequoia has by having, you know, those lower elevations. But on the flip side, we look at introduced species, and Kings Canyon has 48 non-native species, and Kings Canyon is 173. So on the flip side, those low elevations are also full of weeds. Oh, what are you to do? So Sequoia kind of has some good news, bad news going with it. Yep, a lot of weeds down there in those low foothills and such. Okay, well, these aren't weeds. I'm going to show you now pictures. So now I'm going to work my way up in elevation. I'm mostly going to show you a lot of things that are from Kings Canyon, but they're also in Sequoia. Some of these photos, this photo in particular is not that old. It's showy flocks. Just makes you stop the car when you're driving by these. This is more kind of the foothill chaparral area. So just outside of Kings Canyon, but Sequoia has this too. Harlequin lupin, just outstanding. These are so beautiful. And this just makes it up to Kings Canyon, but Sequoia has it. These are really cool lupins. Here's a up close and personal. I love lupins. And actually, I'm not getting too bad with identifying them, but that's when you get in trouble, when you think you know your lupins. Wind poppy, another neat thing that's more in the kind of in the chaparral. I love these two with the orange. I'm going to say I love every plant, so I guess I better just stop that. I'll just say that now. I love all these plants. This is a really neat monkey flower. It's on carbonate, you know, limestone. This is only down in Sequoia. Kings Canyon, even though it has that limestone that's just outside of the park, but Boyden doesn't have this species, but actually has another rare erythranthe. I gotta say not mimula. I'm trying not to say mimulus. So I gotta just say monkey flower. Kauai monkey flower is really cool plant, and it's a 1B3, so it's a rare plant. Madeira leptosiphon. This is not in the parks, but it's just outside Kings Canyon, not too far. It's pretty rare. I just like the photo a lot, so I want to include this. And Yosemite Lewisia. I've actually never found this in Yosemite, but it does occur in Yosemite, but you'd have to be there when the snows are still there and the road's usually closed. So you'd have to go on your bicycle or cross-country ski and find an area of granite and find those. They're actually in actually throughout the Southern Sierra and the Central Sierra, but they're just so hard to see because sometimes their flowers early as February, when the snow just starts to melt off some of those areas that are right at snow line, they'll pop up. You just have to have these granite, bold granite hills or granite outcrops that have lots of DG, decomposed granite, on them. Anyway, it's a 1B2, so it's a rare plant, but actually I think it's more common than you think. It's just you never get to see it. All right. Yeah, I don't know how many things I've discovered because I'm still working on things, new plants for California, new plants for the flora in general. But here's one I discovered up there on Monarch Divide. That's a Boyden Cave in Kings Canyon. It's a monarch buckwheat. It's really a cool little cushion plant, and it only occurs at the very top, about 6,000 feet. And it's just one known population right now in the world, and it's really rare. And it's, yeah, because it's one population, and there's only there's less than 50 plants. That's what it looks like up close. Pretty cool. And then probably my favorite plant, because I get asked, what's my favorite plant? I got to say this is up there, Monarch Golden Aster. That's up there on the limestone above Boyden. They are spectacular. They are showy. I mean, you can't lose with this plant. I mean, no matter how you take a picture of that, it's going to be outstanding. You can't take a bad picture of Monarch Golden Aster. That one's a little blurry though. This is an old photo. This is like from when I discovered it. So this is almost a 30-year-old photo, 25 years at least. All right. Oh, I mentioned the jewel flower earlier. Here's a jewel flower, but what's this little white guy down here? Well, that turns out to be Monarch Gilia. Turned out to also be a new species, and that was nice. It was named for me. Alva Day honored me with naming it for me. That was very, very kind of her. It's also very rare. I think the biggest threat right now, the reason the 0.1, the little decimal point, the lower that number, the more threats there are. The reason that's threatened is cheatgrass, which is Bromus tectorum, and Bromus rubens, whatever, red brome, or Madridensis rubens, whatever name you want to go with on that, but red brome, and I'll stay away from scientific names. I really need to stay away from those. But anyway, yeah, the bromes are taking over the habitat. I've been to some areas where I can't find it anymore, and I just find the bromes, which is really sad. So Monarch Gilia and the buckwheat, eventually, if those bromes get up to 6,000 feet, they're definitely going to be threatened. It turns out this is most related to the capitate, the big-headed Gilia capitata. I can't think of the common name of it, but and there is some of that there, but that's blue, and the flower heads are dense. But they've done genetics and found out that somehow whatever the other parent is crossed with that and made this guy over time. All right. So here's Kings Canyon, hiking from Rhodes End. There's Cedar Grove and Rhodes End. So hiking up from Kings Canyon from the end of the road, the end of the highway, you can see it's a classic U-shaped valley. Classic U-shape. So glaciers have definitely done their work here. The Boyden Cave area, which is down here, was not glaciated. And with time and uplift and everything, those species down there ended up getting isolated, or being isolated. And while this all got glaciated, those species ended up surviving all that and being downriver here. And so that's why Boyden Cave has very unique species on that limestone, because that limestone is very old surface, and the plants never got trashed like they did up here. But what's happened over time is some of those species, like the single needle pine, pinyon pine, have moved up canyon. So you'll find patches of pinyon pine, you know, up in here. And where you do, you actually have some of the other rare plants from Boyden Cave with it. So one of the things when I've done workshops, I've done two, I did a week-long workshop in here the last time, is that we concentrate on going to the areas with the pinyon pine to find the rare plants. And so anybody that is working or will work in Kings Canyon on the west side, that's something to really hone in on or key in on, or where the pinyon pines are, is where you're also going to find some of these associates that are rare. There's no Gilia yorkii up here, or the monarch Gilia, but there are other things like the jewel flower, the Tippity jewel flower is up here, and the marble mat is up here too. And just more of the high country, or as you're going up in Kings Canyon, this is the Sphinx up here. You see that? I've got some other pictures of two different trips I took of the Sphinx. This is looking up the South Fork a little bit more. So a lot of these pictures are right now are from a workshop I had a few years ago there. There's a big rock that Muir, supposedly John Muir, they call it Muir's pulpit, that John Muir gave talks on. I love to bring the workshop out there and either get a photo or jump off of it, talk about the park. I know it's a great spot actually. And here's the Kings with more of the peaks around the valley from Rhodes End, and Roaring River coming down. In fact, Roaring River, there's rock mat or marble mat, that Petrophyton plant, you know, growing in here. There's pinyon pine here, so one of the associates is the marble mat, and so that's, again, there's some of these are pinions up here, pinyon pine, so that's where you find some of the rare things that have come up from the Boyden Cave area, have recolonized back up. More of the Sphinx, and going up the trail, I think this is going up the trail to Bubbs Creek, going up Bubbs Creek. And the Sphinx, now this is going from, I think, Mist Falls and going up the South Fork, looking back. But this was the year, I think this was 2010. And this was a few years ago, at the same time of year with a lot less snow and a lot drier. And this is an area of pinyon pine up here where there's jewel flower, Tippity Valley jewel flower, growing in the cracks. But during this year, it was so dry that we only found one that was pretty crispy, whereas, you know, 6 years prior, I think it was 2010, when I was there, it was a wet winter, and there so some of these annuals, they're desert-like annuals, they're ephemerals, you know, you have to wait sometimes for good years. Swamp Lake, this is up in the Sierra National Forest, kind of a neat area up there. This is from the 90s, this photo, you can kind of tell it was from a slide. And then Dinky Lakes area, which is included in the flora. And I love that area, and it's real easy to get around. It's very much glaciated, but lots of lakes, lots of neat things, including these guys. So sometimes you'll hit it just right. There's a rattlesnake in here, and you'll see, yeah, you can run into a lot of these in that granite country. Certainly, when you're not really high, you know, maybe 6,000 to 8,000 feet, once you get above 8,000 feet, you tend to get out of the bad rattlesnake areas. But, you know, now I'm kind of moving up higher. I'm getting a little higher in elevation around that 8,000 foot zone now. And you got Mustang clovers. They're just gonna be spectacular. I love those. They're really showy big flowers for a leptosiphon. Of course, most people know this, Pride of the Mountains. And you'll see that, love to be on granite rock outcrops, very showy, Yosemite, all over. We even have them up here. We have 2 different varieties up here. We have more of a purple one too. Lousewort, you see these in the woods in the understory quite a bit. I took this photo last year because I finally got a good photo of them. They're hard to get a good photo of the flowers on the pine woods lousewort. And Sequoia gooseberry, it took me a long time to find this too. This gooseberry is it's very hard to find. It just blends in with the vegetation around it. And there's not that many. This might be one of the only rare ribes or gooseberries in the flora, but it's a 1B, so it's pretty rare. It's only around Sequoia National Park. It's just in Sequoia and just out, and that's it for the world's population. Tulare County bleeding heart, you'll find these from 8,000 to 10,000, or maybe even up to 11. I'd have to look at the flora. These are cool. Bleeding heart's always nice, a lot of gardens. A lot of times people have those. Monkey flowers. So now we'll talk about scientific names here because they did something strange here. They now call this Diplicus bicolor. This used to be Mimulus whitneyi. There already is a bicolor on monkey flowers. There was a Mimulus bicolor. So now it's a little confusing when you see bicolor. There's an erythranthe bicolor, which is the white and yellow one, or it can be all yellow. And now there's the Diplicus bicolor, which is this guy, which means, I don't know if you see the guy in the front, means you can have 2 different colors. You can have this really red fuchsia one, or you can have the yellow one. I like these things though, because they're right next to each other a lot of times where it's the same species, the same monkey flower. Yeah, those are neat. Definitely, very cool. There they are. So, all right. Well, it isn't all about plants. This was the last trip a few years ago when I was there. I didn't take this photo. It was someone in the group and the workshop did, but it's a spectacular owl, flammulated owl. And this was on a live oak. And I mean, to see that it's not part of the live oak is pretty amazing. This thing, it just let everyone take different photos of it. But since it wasn't a plant, I don't think my photo came out too well. So I did use somebody in the group. I don't know if it was Steve Matson or we had some other really good photographers. So I used their photo for this. So I can't take credit for this photo. All the rest of the photos have been mine. But it's a cool critter. Very cool. All right, tiger lilies. Oh yeah, lots of those. I just saw lots of these. I was just in Kings Canyon, and we'll see some of those pictures. And I saw so many Kelly's tiger lilies, or Kelly's lilies. Oh, those are really, all right, purple mountain parsley, very weird plant. Normally you will only see kind of the fruiting parts of the flower. It makes a pom-pom. And by the time you see the pom-pom, it's flowers when there's snow on the ground. So by the time you see the pom-pom and there's no snow on the ground, you're just seeing it in fruit. But my guess is these break off and then they roll around and distribute the seed. Kind of a good idea just to fly around and throw seed everywhere. Oh, there it is. So so that's in fruit. Those actually aren't, the flowers are actually gone. And now that's the calyces and the fruits. All right. This was last year. I went to Mineral King, and some of the geology is really interesting, Mineral King, and I think I mentioned that earlier. And I'm glad it didn't turn into a ski resort back in the 70s and ended up being part of the park. Some of the things up at the higher elevations now. So I'm moving up now in elevation, more of the subalpine to alpine. The rock fringe, very, very showy. Most people that backpack and hike know rock fringe very well. Lots of gentians. Kind of the wet areas. It wasn't a spectacular year as far as moisture goes last year, but the wet areas had these had lots of gentians, which was good. And it was August, and it was already pretty dry. Alpine gentian. Yeah, I really like these gentians. I like the spots on that guy. Columbine Lake. There's a record of a rare fern from here that I tried to discover, tried to re-find, and I could not find it. And I'm not the only one that's been back there. I think Michael Bueller and Ellen have been there looking for it. Anyway, I went everywhere there is any rock outcrop and every crevice, because it likes to be in crevices and on walls. I went everywhere you can imagine looking for it. And I'm not sure either that collection is in error and it didn't really come from here, because there's no other area in the Southern Sierra with it's a spleenwort. There's no other areas in the Southern Sierra with the spleenwort. So I don't know. So sometimes I'm still looking for these mysterious plants. It's in my flora. I have it down as everything in my flora was something that was collected within the area. At least in one of the areas. I may have seen it I may have seen it in Sequoia, but it was never collected in Sequoia. But it will still say it's in Sequoia, as long as there was one collection from one of the places that was in my study, in my flora. That's how some had to get included. Well, this was a real collection, and the collection I've seen it online, and it looks legit as far as the species. But man, I don't know if the location's legit. We can't seem to find it. I couldn't find it. Other people haven't been able to find it. It hasn't been found, and I think it was originally documented in there. I don't know, it was a long time ago. I think over 70 years ago. Anyway, columbines, this is the high elevation. Sierra columbine. I actually got better pictures of that just on my last trip, but whatever. Pygmy fleabane. I saw a lot of this just on my last trip, which was last month, but we'll get to that. David's Penstemon, big flowers, little plant, as far as the foliage part goes, and then big flowers, very showy. I love these David's Penstemons. Those are really cool. The dwarf mountain ragwort, a showy senecio, right in rock, very nice. So showing you more of the area there around Columbine Lake, and I went up in here looking for that spleenwort. I went all up in here. I went everywhere you can imagine that thing would grow, because I've seen it. I've seen it in at least 2 different areas. I've seen it in Lassen. I've seen it in Oregon. Anyway, couldn't find it. That's one of those things that's going to bug me for a long time. All right, Cushion's buckwheat. This is related to the monarch buckwheat, where I said there's just the one population at the Boyden Cave limestone. This is the thing that, this is the buckwheat that Jim Reveal, who at the time when he was alive, told me that the thing I found at Boyden was this. And I said, no, it's not that. These have really little leaves and the flowers are smaller, the inflorescences are flower. Anyway, Cushion buckwheat's a deep plant, but not the same thing. It's related. It's a different variety of ovalifolium, but it's definitely not this. This is a high elevation thing. It can sneak down to maybe 6,000, 7,000, but it still is not right. It's not the same plant. See, those pom-poms are a lot smaller, and the flowers are smaller, and the flower heads. Kind of the east side, that Mineral King area, pretty desolate. It's high up. It's high up country. This is all alpine country until you drop down to as soon as you get into trees, you have the subalpine. And in that neck of the woods, you have Sierra foxtail pine. The Southern Sierra has a population of foxtail. It's a different subspecies than the foxtail pine we have up here in the Klamath Mountains. And they're both just outstanding trees. The bark is different too. The bark's more orange on the Sierra species or Sierra variety, and the Klamath one, they're a little darker bark, and the pattern's a little different on the bark. But other than that, the foliage is pretty much the same, and the cones are pretty much the same. The bark is different though. It's not as blocky on this one in the Sierra is not as blocky as what we have up here in the Klamath. A lot of Clark's nutcrackers love these just as much as they do white bark pines, which they also, feed on and store the seeds all over the place, and then have to remember where all those granaries are. Monarch Lakes, this is still that area of Mineral King. And now I just jumped to the other side, to the east side, going up into Kings Canyon country. And there's a brown mountain on the far left, and it's called Chocolate Peak. And this is actually some limestone that's not far from Bishop Pass, and then coming up from South Lake, out of Bishop, and then the South Lake Trailhead. And this was a really interesting area that I went into with Martin Purdy, that has a study area next to this on Coyote Ridge. He's doing a flora through Rancho Santa Ana for his master's. And he went with me up here. We thought this would be an interesting area to look at, this limestone, and it was. We found some pretty cool drabas, and I'll be showing you pictures of those in a second. And he's really into drabas because he has so many different drabas in his study area. And then we ended up camping here that night on Luau Lake in the Inconsolable Range. So this is just outside my flora, but it pretty much, it's close enough that my flora, you can be used to key things in here. Even though it's east side, it's high enough east side that it's pretty much, the same alpine as what the flora covers. It's just when you get below this and start getting into lodge or pinyon pine and a lot of the sagebrush, and you start getting species that my flora doesn't have. For that east side, and you start getting Mojavian type of thing, Great Basin kind of stuff. Well, then that's when I don't cover it. But the thing we found there by Chocolate Mountain on that limestone is this lance pod draba, which this thing's really pretty much is known from the White Mountains. And I think Martin has told me now that he thinks he found it in a study area, that he has it in a study area. He didn't know about it being in a study area before, but we found it up there on that limestone, and we also found it in Kings Canyon, just at Bishop Pass in Kings Canyon. So it's a first for Kings Canyon. It's now actually included in my electronic flora, and I'll talk about that electronic flora in a minute. But it's lance pod draba, and it's rare in California too, means it's more common elsewhere, which I believe would be Nevada for the White Mountains. And here's how you know this draba is the fruits are these long guys here. And it's got white flowers with these long fruits, perennial cushion plant. And speaking of cushion plant, I just took this last month. This is Sierra Lewisia. All these photos I'm going to show you now are just from last month. Sierra Lewisia, that actually isn't turned sideways. That's how this thing was growing in a crevice, alpine zone, above tree line. Pretty cool. I like Lewisias too. And now this is dropping into LeConte Canyon and going down to the John Muir Trail, John Muir Pacific Crest Trail. It's the same trail through this area of Kings Canyon. And yeah, that's what I look like after a few days in there. I had basically almost 100 miles of hiking to do and didn't have a lot of days to do it, but I did it, took a lot of pictures, and that's what I was looking like. I didn't shave. And because I already been out actually for a while, even before I got down there. But this is getting down to the John Muir Trail. And actually this is along the John Muir Trail, and just a rare sedge. This large sedge, it's Congdon sedge. This thing's huge, and it just grows all through the boulders. When you find it, you just find a big patch of it. It's not that rare, listed as a 4, but it's still pretty cool. Pretty cool to run into. I ran into it like maybe 3 different times up there in the alpine, and it's right at the subalpine to alpine zone. And this is definitely getting into the alpine. This is Helen Lake on the way to Muir Hut, and Muir Hut is what I have behind me during this presentation. It's been behind me the whole time. This doesn't have a name, still getting toward Muir Hut, alpine zone. Yeah, there it is, Muir Hut. and I was the only one up there. So when I was up there, I was also up there in 1979. It was crowded. There were people everywhere. But I was just up there. I was up there 3 weeks ago. I had it all to myself. In fact, I didn't see anybody until I was quite a ways down the trail that I saw my first, 2 people that were going up. So it was really nice to kind of have it all to myself and didn't have to worry about getting everyone's permission for the photographs and that kind of stuff. And then up there in the rocks, so I explored up there, and there was a bunch of the lemons draba, just beautiful, very showy. That was neat. And my panorama with the hut in the middle here, this is Mount Solomon. So this country is just gorgeous. And again, I mentioned this is the divide. If you go this way, you're going into the Kings. You go this way, you're going into the San Joaquin. So here's the divide between the Kings and the San Joaquin. So there's a little bit of San Joaquin drainage. This, South Fork of the San Joaquin is in Kings Canyon. And Goddard Canyon feeds that, evolution. And in fact, Sapphire Lake, this is all part of the South Fork of the San Joaquin. This is where I camped that night after coming over the pass. Just a spectacular spot. Really nice. And here's Evolution Valley, 1979, when I was going through on the Pacific Crest John Muir Trail. 1979, 2020, this was just a few weeks ago. So 3 weeks ago. So this is a July photo, whereas this was an August photo. So August, it starts getting pretty crispy. The meadow wasn't quite drying. It was still pretty green. It's almost the same trees and same rocks. And in fact, it is the same rocks. Those rocks right there are the same rocks. Oops, where was I? Are those rocks right there. So I almost got to the same spot. And that was just by luck. I just wanted to take another picture of Evolution Valley, and I knew I'd taken one in 79. I had no idea where I took it in 79. Well, come to find out, I wasn't very far away. And this isn't like a spot that the trail is making a corner and you just like, oh, I should take a picture there. No, I have to actually come off the trail and walk in the meadow a little bit to take this photo. So I'm not quite sure how I figured out to go same spot, but somehow I did, or almost. Anyway, evolution again, just spectacular. Hardly anybody back there. All right, here's a leptosiphon. Oh, looks like this one got a little blurry here. That I just saw out there on the trail. I hadn't seen before, the Sierra Nevada leptosiphon. It's not as crisp as it could have been. And that's my feet. Smelly feet. Okay, so there's a place called Blaney Meadow at Muir Ranch, which is just off the PCT and John Muir Trail. And it's a supply point for people on the Pacific Crest Trail, which there were some people getting supplies there. It's not open for tourists or for people to stay there, but it is open for resupply. And right next to it, across the river, is Blaney Hot Springs. And this is the one that's rock lined. There's 2 pools. There's one that's all mud and a little bit of rock in it, and then which is on the public land. And then I believe this is on Muir Ranch land. And it was early in the morning, and I snuck over there after this guy got out, and I got in it, and it was heavenly. Oh, it was so nice. My feet are still happy. Okay. Yeah, Blaney Meadows. I had also gotten into that, but the muddy one back in 1979. In fact, I didn't even know about this really nice one that's just across, not too far away from the muddy one. But I saw that guy in it, and I go, oh, there's the other. I had heard there was another one. I just didn't know where it was. Well, I found it. All right. Oh, I'm to the book. So that's what the book looks like. That's the hard copy cover. Well, I mean, the other one looks that way too, the electronic one. So that's what the book looks like, the flora. And the electronic version, which has the same cover, but the electronic version is nice from the standpoint. It's kind of like the ebook version or the electronic version of the Jepson flora now is all electronic. And the reason for that is as soon as I published the flora in 2018, it was already somewhat obsolete. It was already not with the times. Things, you know, people discover stuff all the time. I just discovered that draba, you know, and so the electronic version, I'm revising all the time. I've done 9 revisions to the electronic version. It works. I have an example here in a second. It's available at Amazon. So I just revised it last month based on what I saw last month. I added species. I even worked more on the draba key after using it a bunch with Marty. I revised it more. I didn't like the Penstemon key. It was a little confusing about the openings of the anthers. And I know that I know some of you know what I'm talking about. I straightened that out. I made it a lot less confusing. I even confused myself when I was trying to use that key, and I was like, yeah, I gotta fix that. So I've fixed lots of stuff. I've even got some color photos I've added for plants, and I'm gonna keep doing that for things that don't have illustrations. So the ebook version, it's the same price, but the ebook version is cool because it doesn't weigh as much as this huge book. And the ebook version looks like this when it's on. This is a screenshot from my phone. And this is what I was using when I was out there. I didn't bring the hard copy. I was using this. And this is the draba section. This is the updated draba. You'll see that there's draba longocarpa right in the middle. And with the illustration, well, I only had just added that for this version. And so that wasn't even known. There was some weird collection from Sequoia. Well, I just added kings to that. You can see it says kings, and the numbers all reflect that now. So the numbers are very different in the electronic version now as far as how many species there are and what species there are. It's changing all the time. And I added something that wasn't even known from either park. It was a bird's beak. And I did that by finding that just on the border of the park. So sometimes there's these things that just creep over, you know, one park or the other at the borders. All right. There's a lot of people made this happen. There's no way I could have done this on my own. No way. I mean, forget it. So first of all, I thank, you know, Kristen for tonight, you know, and wanting to do this. It's been great. And with, you know, having to do it online, it's been wonderful. My good friend and bryologist, he really knows his mosses, and he has a lot of you guys collecting mosses for him, is Jim Shebach. Jim is the guy that went out with me when I discovered the new plants at Boyden in '95. I dragged him out because first of all, I didn't have a collection permit for the forest, for either forest, Sequoia or Sierra, because it turns out that some of the new plants that discovered there are on one or both of those forests. And I didn't have a collection permit, so I figured the best thing to do is call the regional biologist, the regional botanist out of San Francisco, was Jim. And I called him up and I said, Jim, I need to collect these things. I don't have a permit, but what about if you came with me? And he said, yeah, because I knew Jim had discovered new species in the Southern Sierra and was very interested in the flora of the Southern Sierra. And he came out with me. Yeah, he'll tell you the story someday. It didn't go so great because I dragged him up there thousands of feet, but it turned out to be a friendship that has been long lasting. I still do trips. So last October, I did a big trip with Jim up here, and he continues to come up here to the northern part of California and the Klamath Mountains. So he's been a good mentor on how to do a good job collecting and making good specimens. He really helped me at the very beginning. Christina Scherenbeck was my neighbor and working at Fresno when I started as a master's student, and I took her evolution class, which was outstanding, an outstanding professor. She was a big inspiration for me doing this. Phyllis Faber, I can't say enough about Phyllis. She was my rock that said, you know what, you can do it. Just, we want to publish this and we're going to get it done one way or the other. So Phyllis was wonderful. She was the editor for a long time of Madronia and a long time CNPS member. And the Kaufmans, Michael and Allison. Allison was pregnant and working on editing the book during early 2018. And Michael I mean, just did so much work on the book, and his books are outstanding, by the way, too. And the books that he puts out for up here, and he's going to have a natural history guide to the Klamath Mountains coming out pretty soon. David Keel, Nancy Morin, Holly Forbes, Frank Almeida, you know, at Cal Academy of Sciences, CNPS gave me a grant, which I used to pack my presses in and out of Kings Canyon. It basically paid for the horse packer, which was wonderful to have that done, and I didn't have to carry them myself. And Sierra and Sequoia National Forests and their staff, and my family for putting up with all the time I was on a computer typing away on the flora and having nights out. All right, another way you can check out the newest photos that I'm doing, I just took this yesterday of the spiranthes, of this lady tresses at the dunes right by, I mentioned Carol Ralph, our president, for our chapter up here. I took it right by her house. She had a stick there marking it for me and everything, and gave me good directions to it. Is on Instagram. I'm at PCT_botanist because I'm working, that's my newest and latest venture, is working on a guide with Jim Andre to the PCT California. And so I need lots of photos, and no matter where I get the photos, if they occur on the PCT, I want them. And so I got the spiranthes, or the lady tresses, yesterday, which I'm very happy about. And that's it for me. Phew, that was a lot of talking.
Dana, thank you. That was very engaging. I know that it's difficult in this format with no audience to see and whatnot, but that was a delight. Applause from everybody, I'm sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I think we decided that we're going to go ahead and entertain questions now, and then Melissa will have like just a couple little closing remarks at the end. And we have a few really good questions here in the queue, so I'm going to start with the ones that are here. And anybody who's listening, if you think of a question, I think we want to try to just do this for as long as we can, maybe 15 or 20 minutes. And we'll just see at that point how many questions are still coming in, if at all, and we'll do that. So really quick, I'm actually going to start with kind of just a technical question that came in. Is there a place that you can get your book, the digital version of your book, other than Amazon?
Yeah, you know, I wish there were. I really do. I'm not, you know, like a big fan of this, you know, huge corporate conglomerate, you know, thing, but it's kind of the only way they have the software to make it a book that is not like a PDF. You know, if it's a PDF, then that's kind of, you know, I get a little bit of money. Amazon gets most of the money, unfortunately. I get a little bit of money, but they're the ones that design the software, and they're the ones that have the site, and they're running all that. I get that part of it. I get a little bit of money from it, not very much. I don't get any money from the hardcover one, and that's fine. I want CNPS to benefit because I love CNPS. I love what they're about. I love the mission of Native Plant Society, and that was, I mean, they're even in my, you know, my will to get things. So, I mean, I don't mind that part at all, but it's the electronic one, you know, to help cover gas, like on this big trip I did for doing more research and finding more species. I don't mind I get a little gas money out of it. I'm not going to retire and get rich off of the electronic book, but unfortunately, but I don't also want to make it a PDF. I think that kind of devalues it in some ways, and also would hurt maybe the CNPS, you know, buying the hard copy too, to some degree. So, no, Amazon is the only place right now. But the nice thing is that software is pretty cool. The electronic version that I just put out, I know it's tough if you already have like an older electronic version, you know, like what changes did I make? It's pretty hard for me to track all those. It would just be a huge cumbersome ordeal to keep tracking the changes because a lot of them are small, but some are big. I just added new species, the numbers changed, this kind of thing. But I really fixed up the Draba key, and I got new things and illustrations with Draba in there. But what I was going to say is I got rid of all the orphans. The older versions, there were half of the description was one page and half was on another, and that was a real pain. And I saw that using it on my phone. I didn't like that at all. So all the orphans are gone. I fixed every one of those, and that took a lot of time. That was several days of going through every one, because every family starts with a new page. So the whole family then has to be fixed. And then a family's good. Once a family's good, it's good, because then the next family starts with a new page. So all these things you need to think about when you're doing a book, like how's the format going to end up? And the software is really nice that Amazon has to make it a textbook. So it won't work on a Kindle. Just I want to make that clear. Because it's a textbook with illustrations, it's a textbook-like kind of work. It won't work on a Kindle. It can't move the graphic around with the print and stuff because it's got to be together. So it won't work on a Kindle. I'm just going to put that out there again because people have called their support staff at Amazon and said, "Why won't it work on my Kindle?" It can't work on a Kindle. It won't. The software I used, it won't work. I tried to use the Kindle software. It won't let me do it.
So it sounds like it's targeted for your various smart devices, a traditional kind of tablet or a smartphone.
Yeah, it works great. I had the screenshot from my phone. What's really nice is for those of us that the eyes aren't as good as they used to be, you can make those illustrations nice and big. And really the quality's not bad. The quality stays pretty well with those illustrations. I put them as high quality as I could. They're from Abrams. Mostly, they're not all from Abrams. There's a few that were done by different people for like the newer species. And then I'm putting photos in now. So those are kind of like Easter eggs, like try to find the color photos for the plants that I've added, which color photo, what plant got a color photo now,
Yeah.
So, Kristen, maybe we can alternate here.
Sure, go for it.
Related question. For those who just bought, sticking to the book, for those who just bought the hard copy version, who might want the changes in the ebook, do you have to buy the ebook? Which means you have to basically fork out the same amount of money for the ebook, even though you just bought the hard copy?
Yeah.
Or are there plans for some kind of an update?
Well, yeah, eventually the hard copy will be updated. But the thing is the hard copy is owned by California Native Plant Society wholly. They wholly own it. I actually have to buy it from them if I want it. So the hard copy, someday, I'll just take the electronic version now and make a new hard copy from it. But like I said, it's just too onerous for me to track. Since, that the hard copy is not really even my book anymore. It's it's Native Plant Society's book. I'm not tracking all the differences. Like if I had a website and all that, yeah, I could do that, but I don't have all that kind of stuff. It's just me. And I think just updating the electronic version and just people knowing that, yeah, it's another $40, but the hardback or the actual book itself, it's actually a soft cover. The actual book itself it's kind of heavy, so it's not really great for the field unless you're driving, unless you're, in your car or stuff, but you're going to do any hiking. It's a little heavy to hike with. I really recommend the electronic version. Oh, I know what I was going to say. It was also like half price for a long time. CNPS had it for $20 for a long time. You can maybe even find a used copy on eBay. So you may not have to pay the full price. As time goes on, it will go down in price, probably, is my guess. So yeah, it's just kind of tricky that way. It's kind of like I bought the Jepson manual And, you know, there's all these things about all the additions, but it's 10 pages. You know, who's going to go and write all those little additions? And it's just going to be a tedious thing. You know, it's just like, I just use the electronic one now, Jepson manual, as much as I can. So yeah, I'm sorry about that, people having to buy both if they want the latest and greatest. But really, you don't need the latest and greatest unless you're really doing some serious botany in the parks and the surrounding area. And if you're doing botany surveys for a job, you're a consultant, or you're with an agency, yeah, you should have the electronic version and not for working in the field. And you can have the paperback one, or whatever, you can have that at home, or, you know, on the coffee table. I know some people use it and key out of it. I've heard that and stuff, and that's great. But you know, it's hard to keep a flora up to date. And so the electronic version, if you really need to have that kind of information, the electronic version is right now the best way, you know, to do that. But if you don't really need that, and really for all the common things, it's generally going to be fine. You're not going to have any problem there. But I have found some common things that I didn't know were in one park that are, and so I've made those changes too.
Okay.
Like milkweed, like the purple milkweed. I found it was in Kings Canyon, so now I've added that, you know, to Kings Canyon. It's not just in Sequoia. Those kind of things. Okay.
Okay, Kristen, back to you.
Yeah, actually, the earliest question that came in, I don't want to lose this one. I really like it. This is about climate change, Dana. And the question is, when you compared your own collections, your sort of more modern day collections, to the older ones that you were using for your flora and your graduate research, did you see any big differences in the elevation at which species were occurring?
No, I think what the difference is a lot more weeds. Unfortunately, I was the one that had to collect a lot of the weed species, and some of those are getting higher and higher in elevation as climate changes. You know, we're seeing cheatgrass, you know, up here in the Klamath, I'm seeing it as high as, you know, like 8,000 foot peaks, 8,000 foot ridges. I'm seeing cheatgrass go that high. And I never thought that cheatgrass would be a problem at that kind of elevation. And I'm seeing it get higher in Kings Canyon too, at Boyden. I'm seeing it end up higher and higher. Now, the top of Boyden is 6,000 feet. I mentioned the monarch buckwheat is up there at 6,000 feet, one population. I'm going to dread the day that cheatgrass and red brome are up there growing with it side by side, because it's working its way up there. And with climate change, it may just get there. So, and then where does that buckwheat go as things get hotter? And, you know, it's at its top. It needs that climate right there at 6,000 feet on the top of that ridge. And as climate changes, you know, these Sky Island things are going to be in trouble.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I'll just add, you know, the climate research really seems to be the wave right now. There's a lot of researchers around the state that are doing that kind of climate change research. I know here at Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo, Dina Grossenbacher does a lot of work on the Sky Islands. So yeah, I mean, it just takes a lot of data collection, and that'll be really interesting to start seeing some answers to those questions. But
yeah, you know, that's another reason for my flora, is to document in time the species we had and where they were for the most part. I mean, I don't, other than at the introductory materials that you mentioned at the start of my talk, I generally don't have actual locations for the species. I have habitats and elevation range and what park and that kind of thing. And the reason I didn't, like a lot of floras will say, oh, you know, found at Road's End, blah, 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 and, you know, and all that. I didn't do that for a couple of reasons. Well, one is for the whole thing, I wanted to document what elevation ranges and when things flowered, the phenology of things at the time I did my flora, because that may change with climate change. And so they'll be able to compare it, you know, maybe in the future, maybe 50 years or whatever, and say, oh, you know, Dana said this flowered then, but now we're seeing it flower much earlier or later, or we don't even have that species anymore. So one reason for my flora was just to compare, you know, to a point in time to set what plants were where. The only reason I didn't put specifically where things are is because they're always changing, you know, and they're moving. I didn't want to give people the idea that that's the one spot you need to go to find it. And for rare things, I didn't want to send people to the one spot you can find it and have more weeds end up getting there, because now everyone's going to the one spot where this rare thing is, you know. So I had various reasons. It was done on purpose, not to have specific locations other than what I have in the front. You know, that was kind of a way to find a compromise. Was the information I gave in the front about areas to go see some of these rare plants and stuff, but I was trying not to give, like, you know, coordinates kind of thing. Still general.
You know, the hunt is half the fun anyway, so.
It is. You're right about that. It's a treasure hunt.
Yeah.
Dana and Kristen, there was one question that came into me privately. And one person was asking, are there wildflowers blooming now? And could you suggest some hikes to find them?
Yeah, there's lots of wildflowers blooming now.
I would think so.
Yeah, I mean, you know, that's almost a tougher question is, you know, what's your favorite plant? Like, where should you go hiking? The thing is, you know, areas, meadow areas, wet areas along streams, a lot of those plants are still going, you know, big time. You know, meadows still are looking really good. I mean, at least they were, you know, 2-3 weeks ago. As you saw from that one photo I have from 79 to now, is, you know, the meadows will start to dry out, especially the ones that they're along streams that aren't maybe as moist. But, you know, the moist meadows, the boggy meadows are going to still have flowers coming out. So, you know, as far as hikes in those parks, you know, anything from Road's End, it's a famous destination for backpackers, but the day hikes are fantastic. There's lots of beautiful day hikes from there. And I would say for even Road's End, it's still going to be good. You're still going to find things along the stream, in the meadows, and some late things, some of the asters that are later. So Road's End's a great spot. You know, seeing the giant, if you want to see the giant trees, I'd still recommend, you know, those hikes are still going to be good and have flowers. You know, any of the giant tree hikes, you know, like the Sherman tree or General Grant Grove area. So yeah, it's a tough question. There's just, all the hikes still in the park are good, in any of the parks, Yosemite, whatever. It's still early enough. As you get later in the month, yeah, it's going to get a little tougher to find wildflowers, but you know, up here, people are showing me photos with all, I'm seeing it on Instagram, you know, wildflowers everywhere up, you know, 7,000, you know, 6,000-7,000 feet up here right now.
All right. Excellent answer.
Yeah. Nice. Go anywhere.
Yeah.
Just go up in the mountains. Yeah, it's good.
We've got another question here, kind of about what's your favorite. If you've got a 3-day weekend to hike into the High Sierra, what could you recommend, or what's your favorite 3-day hike in and out?
Yeah, 3 days, huh? Yeah, I'll tell you, that's a tough one. You know, I was just in that Mount Dana area. I really love that area of Yosemite, but you know, I got also talk, and there's great plants because it wasn't that glaciated up there. Convict Lake area, a 3-day trip up in the Convict Lake area in the Sierras is fantastic off the east side. And then in Kings Canyon and Sequoia, just about any of those hikes in the backcountry. There's the High Sierra Trail in there, you know, 3 days on that. And in Sequoia, I've done some 3-4 days in there. It's just gorgeous. It's all part of the Kauai and the Kings, the divide between the Kauai and the Kings, very nice. Yeah, just all the trails really right now in 3 days, just, yeah, throw on a backpack and overnight. There's so many good places. It's still really good right now. The thing is, the more in the backcountry you get right now, the less people you're going to see. The trailheads and everything for day hikes are pretty crazy right now, especially the east side of the Sierra because of Los Angeles. They're all trying to get out of there. And it's crazy on the east side right now. So you want to get in at least, you know, a 3-day hike, yeah, get in a day or so, and then you won't see a million people. Like at the trailheads right now and the campgrounds, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah. I experienced that myself recently on a very quick trip to somewhere that wasn't super deep and remote, and it was busy. You know, the other thing I just want to share, Melissa, I don't know if you are seeing any other questions. I think we kind of got all the ones that came in, but there's
Yeah, I think we did.
a good handful of questions coming in just thanking you, and I just wanted to pass that along. I don't know if you open your chat window, but
No, I haven't.
a lot of good feedback here. So, you know, that's the Zoom version of applause. I think
Okay.
this was really enjoyable. We think we had about 70 people sitting there with us the whole time. So, so that's pretty good. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. I know I got some weird looks from my kids when they walked by, though. So it always took me a second to recover from that. It's like, what?
I know.
Really? That's going to be my feedback? Is a weird look?
Yeah, it's tough, but very enjoyable. Thank you so much for this, and it was very engaging, and I took a bunch of notes in the margins of my copy of the book for some spots that I might want to go check out, so
Okay,
I appreciate
good.
that.
Good. Yes, the thanks are rolling in, and I want to thank everybody who attended, and I think this was a really successful first Zoom general meeting, and thanks to Kristen, and thanks to Dana and Judy for doing all of the online work. And for those of you who are in our chapter, you notice on the screen that we have some volunteer positions open for retail sales and hospitality. If you want to help us out, we could certainly use your help. Kristen, Judy, do you have any more words of wisdom?
I don't. Yeah, thank you. I want to read this to Dana from Michael Euler. Thanks, Dana. You're my inspiration. What a great talk. We are going to the Ionian Basin in a couple of weeks. We're taking the hard copy, the one you autographed for us. Thank you for all you do, the Eulers.
Yeah.
That was nice.
Yeah.
Thank you for reading that, Judy. That's nice.
Yeah, thank you.
Dana shouldn't have missed that one. That's
That
right.
was really nice. Yeah. Thank you, Michael and Ellen. Fantastic. I took them up Mount Eddy. They had bid on a trip with me, a silent auction at the North Coast Botanical meeting, and they won it. And so I took them up a couple months ago up Mount Eddy, and it was such a pleasure to hike and camp with them and show them the cool plants up there on Mount Eddy. So yeah, they're pretty special people, and I think all of you guys have a great chapter. I look forward to maybe doing more with your chapter. And yeah, thank you guys, Judy, Kristen, and Melissa. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
There's one more slide to inspire everybody if you want to advance.
Oh, there it is. Sorry about that.
Yes. You don't have to be a scientist to help. Take action. All right. And thanks again to everybody for being with us, and thank you for your thank yous, and help us out to whatever extent you can. Appreciate it all.
All right, everyone.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining, and have a good night.
That's it. All
Yeah,
right.
thank you, everybody.
Good night.